woke up and because I went to sleep early, and then I actually went to sleep at I woke up at like 4 a.m. and then I went back to sleep, and I woke up at 10 o'clock, and I had the meal, and then after that, okay, I'm like, what am I gonna do? So I'm looking at the bookshelf over here, and there's a bunch of books here that were left here there was a guy that used to live in this apartment, and a lot of them are like hashkafa, philosophy books, Kabbalah stuff, so, the Torah, obviously, Sidurim, whatever it is. Some of them are like what I would call, typical Kiruv books. There's one book in particular that I noticed that I actually, it's funny, I kept looking at it, and I saw the title, and I was like, and I look at the person who wrote it, and I was like, it's probably some corny, I literally was like judging a book by its cover. I was like, it's probably some corny Kiruv book. But then I'm just like, you know what? I want to read, instead of reading some halacha book or this, I actually want to read just a book, maybe an interesting book. So I pull out this book. The name of the book is 2020 Vision. I look at the book, and it just says, I look at the back, and it says, this is a novel. It's a thriller novel book. And I open it up, and I start reading the intro. Before I read the intro, I open, the front cover, and I see that the book was published in 2008. The author of the book is a man by the name of Roy Neuberger. For those of you guys who don't know, Roy Neuberger, he is, I think he's like in his 70s. He was a former hedge fund manager, and he and his wife became Baalei Tshuva. They became religious in their 30s, actually at the age of 31, actually when I became religious, the same age I did. And this is when they were already married and with kids, and he became very involved with Rebbetzin Younger, I said blessed memory, and her organization Hineni, stuff like that. And he wrote a few other books. He wrote this famous book called, I think it's called From Central Park to Sinai. So actually, I saw his name on this book, so I was like, it's probably some corny Kiruv book, whatever it is. So finally, I opened it up, and I start reading it, and I start reading the, actually, you know what, I'll open it up, and I'll read you guys the introduction to the book, and honestly, I froze when I read this. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to remind you, the book is called 2020 Vision. It was written in the year 2008. The setting of the book is July 2020, or it starts off July, and then the story continues into like August. I'm going to read you guys the intro. Let me just get the book for a second. Okay. So, all right. So actually it starts off, before I read you guys the intro, it starts off with, he includes a pasuk here, not a pasuk, but a commentary from the Malbim, Rabbi Meir Leib Ben Yechiel Michel. He was a commentator who lived in the 1800s, from 1808 to 1879. And this is a commentary on the book of Ezekiel, on Yehezkel. And he basically writes, in the end of days, after the children of Israel have returned to their land, the children of Ishmael and the children of Esav will unite to attack Jerusalem. They will form a world coalition against the tiny nation of Israel, but something will go wrong with their plan. The religious beliefs of the children of Ishmael and the children of Esav, meaning the West, will clash, so Islam and Christianity, and the two nations will collide and destroy each other. This is what is referred to as the War of Gog and Magog, as you guys have probably heard ad nauseum, for lack of a better term. Following the cataclysmic conflict, the final redemption of the Jewish people will occur with the coming of Moshiach, ben David, son of David. So this is the commentary that he includes. So this is here. I'm going to read you guys the prologue. It's actually not too long, and I mean, when I read this, I basically almost plotzed. Again, I'm reminding you, this book, ladies and gentlemen, was written in the year, or it was published, it might have been written even earlier than that. It was published in the year 2008. Yeah, and maybe even written in 2007. So you're talking, this is like even before, the election of Obama. This is like when George W. Bush was still president, and this is like, you're talking 6 years or 7 years after 9/11. That from that lens. Just 1 second, I want to turn the light on here. So, I'll read you guys just the prologue, and then I'll tell you just the general, without going too deep into the book, because I don't want to, if you guys are going to read it, I don't want to ruin it for you. But here we go. Prologue. The entire world was eager to ring in the year 2020. He's talking about, he's writing a book about 12 years ahead of in time. On New Year's Eve, nearly 400,000 people danced and sang in the park near the Eiffel Tower, which had been completely restored since the terrorist attacks of 2012. So as soon as I read this, I thought to myself, well, the Eiffel Tower was not attacked in 2012, but you guys have seen there has been a lot of terrorist attacks in Europe and in America, since that span of time, or maybe even before that, pretty much leading up until, I don't know, 2016, 2017, and even attacks on Jews, and I don't have to tell you guys. Revelers jammed Times Square, waiting for the crystal ball of descent. For months, this new year had been eagerly anticipated. A year like 2020, containing repeated digits, happens only once every century. Virtually every global marketer seemed to have created a special 2020 campaign. But 2020 symbolized something far more special. This would mark the 5th anniversary of an extraordinary global alliance of every nation on the planet. So he's writing 12 years ahead. What he thought was gonna was basically kind of all the nations would come together in this alliance, and so to speak, peace would be made. So he says the horrific floods, hurricanes, famines, earthquakes, and fires of 2014, followed by, again, he's writing this in the year 2008, ladies and gentlemen, 2007, followed by the terrifying threat of the PRX virus. He just made a virus, he just made a fictional virus, had inspired world leaders to put aside their civil wars, nationalistic goals, and cultural barriers. Ladies and gentlemen, I read this yesterday, and I literally was like, I sat there for like 10 minutes, and I was just like, I have to email this guy. I still actually have to find out somehow his email address, and I have to contact him. Sharing their brightest talents and pooling huge economic resources, the Alliance, ominous name, had labored feverishly to reverse the environmental nightmare that had gripped the Earth. So it's kind of like they ran ahead, so to speak, of the Greta Thunberg, as it were. Now, just 5 years later, there were measurable signs that the Earth was responding. So basically, he's saying that in 2015 they started, and 2020, everything kind of came, to fruition, as it were. Alternative sources of energy were rapidly replacing fossil fuels. Oh, I wish, ladies and gentlemen, I wish. Non-degradable products had been mostly phased out by manufacturers. See, you have to understand that, a Jew is writing this, a frum Jew, and he's thinking of a world that actually, comes to its senses and wants to fix itself. Unfortunately, well, up until this point, we haven't been living in such a world, I hate to say. There was a new general respect for the wonders of the earth and a realization that only mutual effort by all nations could protect those resources. Environmentalism, conservation, and the long-term health of the planet were now everyday topics that concerned all citizens as well as their leaders. Green pastures, clean air, and quiet pursuits were replacing Hummers, private jets, and heated pools as essentials of the good life. Ladies and gentlemen, when I read all this, I was like, it seems to me that humanity seems to be always 10 years behind in consciousness, Yeah, it says, it was also noted that 2020 will mark a 5-year period in which there had been no attacks by terrorists anywhere in the world. Many observers credited the work of the Global Alliance and its success in bringing together even warring countries for the common battle to save Mother Earth. So it's kind of like with what Ocasio Cortez said, that, climate change is cascading into certain things in the economics, and it's causing people to be impoverished in the Middle East, and therefore it's causing terrorism and anger and all these kind of things. This is what she purported. Cynics, however, believe that the heavy loss of life suffered in the droughts, floods, and earthquakes that had hit numerous terrorist strongholds in 2014 had merely delayed their mission. So this person is not totally delusional, the one who wrote this book. After the 2020 New Year's festivities, the Global Alliance met to announce a new 5-year plan of environmental strategies. Life settled back to a familiar pace. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you know this, the UN, back in the year 2000, they came out with this thing called the Millennium Initiative. And I want to actually come to those people who created this today, and I want to ask them, so how's that going for you? Winter waned and spring beckoned. Presidential primaries, the return of baseball, and spring cleaning occupied the attention of most Americans. As summer approached, school children became restless, and their parents began planning vacations. Weather forecasters predicted a comfortably warm and calm summer. It seemed that 2020 was going to be a very good year. Ladies and gentlemen, and he goes basically the entire book after this essentially is a story that begins. I'm not going to get too deep into it. I'll just tell you the general synopsis. It begins the day after July 4th, 2020, which is in about 3 months, less than 3 months from now. And basically, this Islamic, I guess, jihadist organization, he doesn't even name them here in this book, somehow get their hands on something called an EMP weapon. It's called an electromagnetic pulse. This is something actually that Fox News has been talking about and all the different news sites have been talking about for a while. And they succeed in wiping out the power grid of the eastern United States, and I think California, and also they succeed in also detonating, physically blowing up pretty much almost every major bridge in the New York metropolitan area. And for the purposes of this book, with the exception of the Outer Bridge Crossing, which would take you from Staten Island to like South Jersey, right? So the premise of the book is basically this guy. It's him and his wife. They are trying to get, the whole power grid is wiped out, so they basically cannot reach their kids. Some of their kids live in Israel. Some of their kids live in, in places like Lakewood. And basically they are trying to reach their kids and then go, basically go from Jersey all the way up north to get a boat from New England to Europe and eventually to Israel. Maybe a plane to Israel. So, ladies and gentlemen, and in the book, every so often you see the author, besides the fact that he's mentioning a lot of Torah concepts and a lot of these, prophecies and different ideas, philosophical ideas. He talks a lot about, again, he's writing this book in 2008, and he keeps mentioning, his family and him and his wife and other people are on this journey, and they keep encountering, anti-Semites, rednecks, people who hate Jews, also what's called, righteous Gentiles, people who help them, non-Jews, but also anti-Semites and all these kind of people. And the constant theme, there's two themes that keep coming up. One theme is everything that we knew, everything that we got used to, creature comforts, things that we thought were important, are basically worthless. The only thing that's worth anything is faith, emunah in Hashem, in God, and the Torah. And the second thing is the concept that basically people keep asking him, why don't we head west? Why don't we go inland instead of going, north to try to get a boat to Europe and to Israel? And he keeps saying, well, if we head west inland, we don't know what other enemies are there. We don't know how many people, because again, it like it says in Tehillim, if we didn't have, law and, so to speak, the courts and law and order, human beings would eat each other alive. So in this book, there's no more grid. The cops don't have any power anymore. So basically, there's just gangs running around, whether it's just regular gangs or Arabs or, like Arab, what is it called? These terrorist cells that were basically activated, which they also encounter. So he basically tells people, he's like, why would we go inland and risk meeting different people who don't like Jews and who can basically kill us, wipe us off the face of the earth? Let's take our chances going to these remote areas, walking through New Jersey and through New York and all the way up to this remote place in like Maine and taking a boat and going to Europe and eventually to Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, I basically figured out what to do for the entirety of rest of Shabbat day, and I basically finished the book, which I could not put down with the exception of going to the bathroom. I finished the book just before Shkia, and I was able to have a mincha. And I was just I was just reading it, and I was like, my God, this is so relevant on so many levels right now. Not that we had this giant cataclysm, God forbid, but we were going through this thing that's basically causing us to revamp our values and think about what's important in life and what's not important, and creature comforts and all these things. And the Jews are thinking, okay, maybe Israel's safer. Like in this book, he's talking about how, for Israel is a safer place at the end of the day because they've been dealing with this stuff. Yeah, they've had attacks and all this kind of stuff, but when you compare it to what's happening in the book, what happened in New York, nobody's going to protect the Jewish people at the end of the day. The cops are not going to protect you. You know, law and order is gone. Everything's gone. And in Israel, they're used to dealing with this stuff. And, you know, it's kind of like old hat. It's par for the course, unfortunately. But at the end of the day, he quotes psukim that say, you know, Israel is protected from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. You know, and anybody who's there, the Jewish people who are there are protected. And I'm telling you guys, I'm sitting here in Jerusalem and I was reading this book. While I'm reading it, I'm saying, thank God in my mind. I'm literally saying, Baruch Hashem that I'm here. Baruch Hashem that I made the decision to come here, you know, a couple of months ago. And I made the decision before that, but I got on a plane a couple of months ago, 3 months ago. And when I got here, I was like, you know, I don't know if I made the right decision. Maybe I should have stayed. I have a business, whatever, this and that. There was different things, family things, business things. But now that I'm here, and I'm just like, you know, on the one hand, it's like I wish, obviously, you know, my family would be here and people I love. But at the same time, like, I'm glad that I'm at least here and I'm not, you know, in the bowels of what I call American Chernobyl, ground zero for this coronavirus thing, which is basically New York, the New York metropolitan area. And also, I'm not compromised, and I'm not compromising others. You know, people in my family. You know, my parents who are in their, you know, their mid-60s. So, and I'm telling you, I was reading this book, and I was just like, my God, like, Hashem really has been guiding me for the past few months, and I'm here, and again, I'm reading these words by I guess the character in the book, which is essentially the guy. It's kind of like a semi-fictional, you know, novel. And he just keeps saying, Israel's the safest place. Israel's the safest place. Israel, you know, it's almost like Dorothy, you know. There's no place like home. There's no place like home, and he just wants to get home. And they're trekking through New Jersey and New York and Massachusetts and all these places and these challenges and tests. And all I could think of was like, my God, this is so. And it's so funny that I literally for 3 months I was looking at this book on the shelf and I didn't even want to pick it up. Because again, like I literally was judging a book by its cover. I thought it was going to be some corny, you know, kind of Kiruv book or, you know, one of these religious books, and then I open it up and it's just it's like a movie. I'm essentially I read a movie for like 3 or 4 hours basically, like a thriller, a fast-paced thriller movie. And I just want to tell you guys honestly, you know, I one more thing actually. After Shabbat I spoke to a friend of mine, and first of all I asked him about. I told him the story of what happened with the cat. He told me that this cat was a spiritual protector. He basically came to, you know, essentially guard your mazal, because there was a lot of mazal that came down, or that comes down on Pesach night and on Pesach, what is it called? You know, on Yom Tov, and in general right now there's a lot of mazal. So you guys are saying, well, where's Moshiach? I had a friend tell me, well, Moshiach came, well, rather, the sea was split on the 7th day. Right now we're on the 4th day. So you know, let's see what happens. But another thing that I want to do, actually, is I actually want to reach out to this author of this book. And I want to tell him, and I actually have seen his lectures. He posted 2 lectures on YouTube talking about coronavirus. And I actually want to ask him about his book, and I want to tell him that how incredibly, for lack of a better term, prophetic he was or he is. Yeah, I mean it's incredible. I'm still thinking about this, and I just think it's interesting that Hashem had me pull out this book on Shabbat and read it at the time that I did, and it's never been more relevant. And I have 2 wishes and 2 hopes that come out of this whole thing. Well, one was that I guess hopefully people will learn, or hopefully people will wake up from this whole thing and realize what's important in life. You know, like you know the guy said in this book. The second thing is I was actually talking to a friend of mine who messaged me from Brooklyn, and I told him, brother, you know, I told him that I read this book, and I said, you know, I used to, back when I lived in New York, and I used to go sometimes to Brooklyn for Shabbat, and I used to go to Brighton Beach for Shabbat, and I used to walk on Neptune Avenue. So Neptune Avenue, I don't know if you guys know, there's a good amount of, there's a big Muslim population there, and there's a good amount of mosques there, and sometimes I'd walk there and I would just be like, I don't have a good feeling here, I really don't. And, my first general thought was just I want to get out of here. In general, I want to get out of this country, at least out of the city. And every time I passed the mosque, I would be like, I wouldn't be surprised if these guys are basically like cells that are like waiting to be activated, and they're just using these mosques as logistics offices or logistics centers. And and also, like, if you look at there's a big amount of influx for people from Uzbekistan, Muslims from Uzbekistan, who actually have pretty much invaded at least a good portion of Brighton Beach and Sheepshead Bay and these neighborhoods. And I'm just thinking to myself, man, I remember like there was actually an attack, a car ramming attack. I don't know if you guys remember, on the West Side Highway next to Stuyvesant High School. It was actually perpetrated by an Uzbeki national who had allegiance to ISIS, and we pledged allegiance to ISIS. And I told my friend, I was like, dude, I really, for all we know, while this whole Corona thing is going on and the whole world is focused on Corona, people still, people who have a mission statement to turn the whole world into, one giant Islamic caliphate. I don't want to say all Muslims, but certain people who are part of that, I guess, group, are still plotting and planning, and their mission hasn't changed. It's kind of like, when you're at a workplace, their manager probably stood up and said, why is everybody standing around? We still have a job to do. We got work to do. And if you look at what Hamas recently said, they said, yeah, we still, we're going to fire rockets at Israel if you don't give us these machines or these ventilators, this or that. And it's like, you ask somebody, like, I don't understand. These people still want to go to war with Corona and all this stuff that's going on. It's like, if you have to understand something, people who don't care about life, all they care about is death. This is like a dream for them. Corona is doing what these people need to go and make an effort to do. Now they just sit back and watch the show. When Corona ends, they're going to pick up where Corona, so to speak, left off. You know what I mean? So, and I was telling my friend, dude, if I was you, and I'm telling you guys, for those of you sitting and watching in America, particularly in New York, if I was you, Jewish people, I literally, I hate to sound like a crazy person, but I would start making preparations to go home. Really, when I say home, I mean Israel. And I don't mean next year, I mean sooner than later. Because, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, it's crazy. Now, today the Israeli government announced that there's a bunch of people that landed 2 weeks ago who did not quarantine themselves. So Bibi just announced that he's not, for the time being, there's no more flights, commercial flights flying into Israel. I don't know about flights outbound, but the thing is, like, for example, I just postponed my trip that was supposed to happen right after Pesach. I just postponed it by 2 weeks. I had a flight booked with United. United luckily had a policy, whoever booked a flight in March basically can have they can change their flight itinerary, free of charge. So basically I could just keep changing it and changing and changing it. Yeah, it's because people land on Saturday, yeah. So whatever it was, it was a lot of irresponsibility on the part of certain people that work at the airport. So now, in the words of Chaz Palminteri from the movie Bronx Tale, now you just can't leave. And he comes into the bar and he asks those guys to leave, and they don't want to leave, and so they cause trouble, and then he locks the door and he said, now you just can't leave. So, ladies and gentlemen, but in the meanwhile, while this is happening, if I were you, I would start making preparations to skedaddle, get out of Dodge. Listen, I know it's not easy. I know it's, you have all the creature comforts of your life, you have your business, you have what you think is your job, and your family, and this and that, and every excuse under the sun. And just like previous generations of Jews in different, friendly diaspora countries, whether it was Poland or White Russia or Germany or Spain or Portugal or France, Iraq, everybody had their wonderful excuses, and then at some point, and wonderful reasons to stay, and wonderful reasons why they can't just go just yet. And then at some point, there's two phrases. The first phrase is, excuses are like, what, everybody has one, or a few, well, in this case, one. The second thing is, at some point, you just run out of excuses, ladies and gentlemen. At some point, you have to learn from Jewish history. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately in this case, Jewish history is like a broken vinyl record. It just keeps playing the same song over and over every few years, every 100 years, every 75 years, every 150 years, whatever it is. And that's it. And then, we see that the past 150 years have been basically Hashem doing what's called kibbutz galuyot, the ingathering of the exiles. This is something that we pray every single day, three times a day. Exactly. Nobody cares about, yes, my friend Essa's famous phrase, my friend Essa, nobody cares about your excuses. Nobody cares. And, we pray for this 3 times a day, to bring back the exiles. And it's happening. It's a machination that's happening. A friend of mine in Tzfat said, people wish for Moshiach to come on a white donkey immediately in a second, in a blink of an eye, in a flash of an eye. And he goes, no, this is not your kindergarten Santa Claus Moshiach story. This is a process. When he comes, it'll be sudden, but up until that point, it's going to be a process. It is a process. We're clearly in that process right now with this Corona thing, with everything that's going on with, in world politics. Even now, all the stuff that they're doing to Trump and just the World Health Organization in China and with the elections and the Israeli elections. Today they just announced that basically, Gantz is not going to form a coalition. He's not going to get any more time. Rivlin is not giving him any more time to form a coalition, which means that if him and Bibi do not form a coalition by tomorrow night, Monday night, midnight Israel time, then Rivlin will say, okay, Knesset, you guys pick the guy. It could be, I don't want to say who, but it could be somebody from Likud, the next in line person from Likud, not the second, but the person that they think is kind of the heir apparent to Bibi, maybe. And it could be we might see a new prime minister, within a month from now, a month and a half, because they basically have, I think, 2 weeks to choose this person, and then that person, after they choose him, or they select him to form a coalition, he has 3 weeks. I don't know if it's the other way around, 2 weeks, whatever it is. In 5 weeks, we might see a new prime minister, ladies and gentlemen. We might see a new prime minister by, I would say, by Shavuot, by definitely after Lag Bomer, maybe even by Lag Bomer, we might see a new prime minister. Ladies and gentlemen, the person that I'm thinking of, it might be very appropriate that he would become prime minister on and around Shavuot, because the person that I'm thinking of might just help to bring the knowledge of the Torah, at least, or open up, so to speak, the field for the knowledge of the Torah to be taught in secular schools in Israel. Not to say that people, kids are going to be forced to become Haredi or even keep Shabbat or kosher, but at least the Torah on a slightly deeper level than just the historical and surface level will be taught in Israeli secular schools, and the next generation of Jewish kids will be educated to know about their heritage, to know about, what is, we want to annex Judea and Samaria. What is this place? What is Shiloh? What is Hebron? What's this? What's that? I was talking to some friends in Texas, and, they asked me about my business, and they said, Tzvi, why did you particularly start with the wines of Judea and Samaria when you started your business? Why did you target those areas? And I said to them, when people who speak about against Israel, let's say people in the West, and they like to say that typical line. They say, well, I'm not anti-Semitic. I don't hate the Jewish people. I just don't like that Israel's doing an occupation, right? I'm just against the occupation. I'm against, I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm anti-Zionist, right? And I said, then, okay, you're not anti-Semitic? Well, okay, let me tell you about my religion. Here's what my religion talks about. The first 2 stories, or the first 3 stories, or parshiot, or Torah portions in the Torah, talk about my forefather Abraham. And then they talk about Abraham purchasing a place called the Cave of the Patriarchs. Where's the Cave of the Patriarchs? In Hebron, right? Then it talks about these other places. It talks about, Jerusalem, this place, that place. And eventually, we came to the land, and it talks about all these places, Gilgal, and etc. And then you go into Tanakh, the books of the Bible, the other books of the Bible talks about a place called Shiloh. It talks about a place called Beit, even before that, it talks about a place called Beitel, where Yaakov went. It talks about a place called Har Grizim, where Joseph was buried. Ladies and gentlemen, so now you're telling me that you're not an anti-Semite, you're just anti-Zionist, but I'm telling you about my religion. I'm telling you about these places, which are not fake. They're not made up Narnia fantasy places. They are real places. So now, your claim that you're not anti-Semitic doesn't really have a leg to stand on, right? So I told these people, my friends in Texas, I said, listen, and so now you're talking about the wine. So now these places are real. Now there are people who live there. There are people who make wine there. They produce wine. They grow grapes. You know, we can look in the Tanakh. We could see some of the prophecies that are essentially being fulfilled via this happening, via these people who are making the wine. So it was a very powerful thing. And where was I even headed with this, ladies and gentlemen? I have no idea. Yeah. Oh, so now we can teach the kids of Israel and just Klal Israel, people in the diaspora, about what this place actually is. You know, that this is ours. This is the cradle of Jewish civilization. And yeah, the person that I'm thinking of, I really hope that he listen, I'll tell you guys again, like I said before, Bibi, for the time that he was prime minister of Israel, he was fantastic. He did his job, he did his role, he played his role very well. He did what he had to do, especially when Obama was president, especially when all these these forces and entities wanted to do a lot of harm to Israel. They could have done a lot much more harm than they did. They did the minimal damage that they could, but it could have been much worse if Bibi was not the prime minister. But at some point, as my friend Yehuda Cohen likes to say, you have to move on to the next stage of Jewish history. And we are in the next stage not only of Jewish history, we're in the next stage of history, period. And that stage began, I believe, on Pesach night, on the Seder night. And we are now in what I like to call Yaakov's world. We have left Esav's world. We're now entering Yaakov's world. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, once Pesach is over with, maybe even before that, we're going to see some interesting things, some interesting wonders and miracles, like open miracles. I don't want to say that necessarily that nature will be, or what is it, the forces of natural law will be suspended, but I think that we will see via natural means, via Derech HaTeva, we're going to see some miraculously amazing things. And hopefully everybody should be healed.